Have you ever tasted a cookie that perfectly balances rich chocolate with the warm spices of gingerbread? These chocolate ginger sugar cookies are a holiday treat like no other. Let's dive in and create something unforgettable. In a large mixing bowl, I start with 3 cups of all-purpose flour, and to this, I add a 1/4 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder. The cocoa brings that deep chocolate flavor that's so perfect with holiday spices and gives these cookies a rich, indulgent taste. Next, I add 1 teaspoon each of ground cinnamon and ground ginger. These spices add a cozy warmth and festive flavor, turning this chocolate dough into something extra special for the holidays. For leavening, I add 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda, which helps the cookies bake up soft yet sturdy enough to hold their shape. Then, I add 1/2 teaspoon of salt to balance out the sweetness. A little salt really enhances the flavors, making each bite taste more rounded and full. Here's an optional addition I love: a tablespoon of cornstarch. Cornstarch is a great secret weapon for cutout cookies because it helps reduce spreading in the oven, so your cookies keep their perfect shapes. Just 1 tablespoon per batch is all you need. It also gives the cookies a slightly softer, more delicate texture, a subtle but lovely effect. Once all the dry ingredients are in, I grab my whisk and mix them thoroughly until everything is well combined. I like using a simple whisk here because it's quick and easy, and it keeps the cocoa and spices from clumping. But if you want an extra fine mix, you could also use a large sifter to combine these dry ingredients, though personally I find a whisk does the job beautifully without needing extra tools. Whisking until everything is evenly distributed ensures each cookie has that perfect balance of chocolate and spice. Once the dry ingredients are thoroughly mixed, I set the bowl aside, ready to bring everything together. In a separate bowl, I start with 1 large egg. I like to go with a large egg for consistency and to make sure the dough holds together just right. Next, I add 1/2 cup of maple syrup. This gives the dough a beautiful richness and subtle caramel flavor, which pairs perfectly with the chocolate and spices. To enhance the flavor even more, I add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Vanilla brings a gentle sweetness that balances all the warm flavors in this dough. I whisk the egg, maple syrup, and vanilla together until they're perfectly smooth and fully blended. There's something so comforting about this mix. The amber hue, the rich scent of maple syrup, and the hint of vanilla all feel like holiday magic coming together in a bowl. Every year I'm reminded of how my holiday baking has become a tradition with my kids. When they were little, they'd sit at the counter, mesmerized by the sweet aromas filling the kitchen. Now my daughter loves to help whisk, and it's heartwarming to see her get just as excited as I do. Here's a tip. Letting the egg, syrup, and vanilla come to room temperature makes whisking so much easier, and it creates a beautifully smooth consistency. Once everything is well mixed, I set the bowl aside, ready for it to add that special warmth and richness to our dough. It's these little steps that bring all the holiday cheer right into the kitchen, with the egg, maple syrup, and vanilla mixture whisked to a smooth, rich consistency. I set this bowl aside. It's ready to bring all that beautiful flavor to the dough when we combine everything. I love this little pause. It feels like the ingredients are waiting for their big moment. And even as I pass by the bowl, I catch hints of the sweet, cozy aroma that makes this recipe so special. Each part of the process adds a layer of holiday cheer, building up the flavor bit by bit. Now, it's time to set up my kitchen mixer. Since I'm making a double batch, I'm relying on my trusty 7-quart stand mixer. This powerhouse is a lifesaver for big holiday baking projects. It handles thick, dense dough effortlessly, and with a larger capacity, I can double recipes without stressing the motor. If you're using a smaller tilt head mixer, I'd recommend sticking to a single batch to avoid overworking it. But with my 7-quart mixer, I know I'm all set to mix up this delicious dough smoothly and efficiently. It's one of those kitchen tools that makes holiday baking a whole lot easier and more enjoyable. Now, for the butter and sugar. In the bowl of my kitchen mixer, I add 3/4 of a cup of unsalted butter that's been softened to room temperature. Softening the butter is key here. It blends so much better at room temperature, giving us that light, fluffy texture we want in the dough. If you're ever in a pinch and need to soften butter quickly, I've shared my top 3 methods for softening butter on my blog, with a link in the description below. It's a lifesaver for those last-minute baking sessions. Next, I add 1/2 cup of sugar. The sugar brings just the right amount of sweetness and creates a delicate crunch around the cookie edges when they bake. Using the paddle attachment, I start the mixer on low speed, gradually increasing to medium to avoid a sugar cloud. I let the butter and sugar cream together for about 2 to 3 minutes until the mixture turns light and fluffy. This creaming step is essential for that soft, tender cookie texture we all love. Afterward, I stop the mixer and use a silicone spatula to scrape down the sides, ensuring everything is evenly incorporated and ready for the next step. Now, I add the egg and maple syrup mixture to the butter and sugar, blending on medium speed until it's fully combined and smooth. At this stage, the dough takes on a rich, warm color, and the aroma of chocolate and spices starts filling the kitchen. It's the first hint of the holiday flavors to come. Just a quick reminder, the measurements I'm sharing here are for a single batch, but I'm actually making a double batch because I need plenty of cookies for Christmas gifting. I've found it's easier to double everything from the start rather than making 2 separate single batches. This way, I can get all the dough I need in one go, which saves time and keeps things simple. If you're not making as many, you can stick with the single batch measurements I'm using here. Okay, I'm going to let you in on my little holiday baking secret. It's how I stay sane during the madness. Here's what I do. I make the dough ahead of time and freeze it. Then, when I have a free moment, I bake the cookies and freeze them again, fully baked. The real magic happens about a week before gifting. I pull them out, let them thaw, and then start decorating. Here's the best part. You can start this whole process as early as September. It's a total lifesaver. The cookies stay fresh. I avoid the chaos of last-minute baking marathons, and I actually have time to enjoy the holidays. Trust me, once you try it, you'll never go back to the old way. Next, I start adding the dry ingredients. I add them gradually, about 1/3 at a time, keeping the mixer on low speed to avoid a floury mess. Adding the dry ingredients slowly ensures everything blends smoothly without overworking the dough, which is especially important for a soft cookie texture. As the dry ingredients incorporate, the dough begins to thicken. Here's a tip I always follow. Keep the mixer on low throughout the step, since the dough is quite dense. Mixing on low keeps everything well combined without putting extra strain on the mixer or toughening the dough. To check if the dough is ready, I pinch off a small piece. If it holds together without sticking, it's good to go. But if it feels a bit sticky, you may need just a touch more flour. In that case, I recommend adding flour 1 tablespoon at a time, blending after each addition. This cautious approach prevents overflouring, so the dough stays tender but easy to roll and cut. Baking holiday cookies has always been one of my favorite family traditions. It's like the kickoff to all things festive in our house. What started as a fun and very messy activity with my kids has now turned into a full-on holiday production. I still remember the days when more icing ended up in their mouths than on the cookies. Now we're baking big batches to share with friends, family, and teachers. And every year we try to outdo ourselves with new flavors and designs. This year, I'm stepping up my gingerbread game with a variety of recipes. From classic gingerbread to twists like chocolate ginger and amber gingerbread. There's something for everyone in my gingerbread recipes playlist. Trust me, it's worth checking out if you want to add some variety to your holiday baking. And don't worry, I've got all the tips and tricks to make sure your cookies hold their shape and look amazing, even if you're working with some wild cookie cutters. But cookies aren't the only treat we're whipping up this season. If you're more into rich, creamy desserts, my fudge playlist is a must-watch. It's packed with recipes for perfectly smooth fudge that's guaranteed to impress, or just keep you happily snacking. Holiday baking is a little messy, a little chaotic, and always a lot of fun. It's not just about the cookies. It's about making memories, sharing laughs, and sneaking bites of dough when no one's looking. So grab your rolling pin, pick a recipe from the playlists, and let's bake up some holiday magic together. Once the dough is fully mixed and has a thick, slightly firm texture, I divide it into 2 portions. Using my trusty silicone spatula, I carefully scoop each portion onto a piece of plastic wrap. The dough at this stage is rich and pliable, but can be sticky to handle. So I like to take my time here to keep things neat and organized. Here's a little trick I swear by. Instead of shaping the dough into a disc right away, I loosely wrap each portion first. This keeps my hands clean and prevents the dough from sticking everywhere. Once it's wrapped, I press and shape it into a flat disc. Not only does this make it easier to handle, but it also keeps the dough neatly contained and ready for chilling. These small steps help keep the process smooth and my kitchen mess-free. Once the dough is shaped into flat discs, I place them in the refrigerator to chill for at least an hour. Chilling is such an important step. It firms up the dough, making it so much easier to roll out, roll and cut into shapes. Plus, chilled dough holds its shape beautifully in the oven, so your cookies won't end up looking like abstract art when you pull them out. This little step can mean the difference between cookies that are Instagram ready and ones you end up eating in private. If you're not planning to use the dough right away, freezing is your best friend, especially during the holiday baking marathon. To freeze, I give each disc an extra layer of protection by wrapping it again with plastic wrap or aluminum foil. Then I pop them into a freezer-safe zip-top bag. Of course, I label the bag with the date and chocolate ginger sugar dough using a Sharpie, because we've all been there, staring at a mystery freezer bag, wondering, is this dough or leftover chili? The dough can stay frozen for up to 3 months, giving you plenty of time to prep ahead. When you're ready to bake, just thaw the discs overnight in the fridge. and they'll be ready to roll. Literally. Whether you're staying ahead of the holiday rush or just love feeling extra prepared, this trick saves time, stress, and your sanity. You know, gingerbread has such a fascinating history. It's like every bite tells a little story. Can you believe it started way back in ancient Greece and Egypt? They used ginger in medicinal stuff, not cookies, which feels so wrong now, doesn't it? By the Middle Ages, it had made its way to Europe, and that's when things got interesting. People would bake these dense, spiced breads and shape them into all kinds of elaborate designs. Knights, animals, even castles. It was basically the medieval version of edible Instagram. And get this, Queen Elizabeth I is credited with making gingerbread cookies a thing. She had them shaped like her courtiers. I mean, can you imagine being served a cookie that looks like you? Talk about fancy. Over the years, recipes started to evolve. Molasses or honey replaced some of the harsher spices, and they added brown sugar to sweeten things up. Now, gingerbread is all about variety. You've got the crispy, thin cookies, the soft, cake-like ones, and even fun twists like adding orange zest or coloring the dough. Oh, and let's not forget gingerbread houses. Those became a thing in Germany after Hansel and Gretel. Can you imagine a cookie inspiring a whole fairy tale? It's crazy how it's gone from this humble spiced bread to a full-blown holiday tradition. Every generation seems to add their own little twist to it, and honestly, I think that's the best part. There's always something new to try. I hope you're loving the process of making these rich and flavorful chocolate ginger sugar cookies as much as I am. Combining the indulgence of cocoa with the warm spices of gingerbread, this recipe is one of my holiday favorites. If you're enjoying this recipe, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss any of my festive baking adventures. Do you have a favorite gingerbread or chocolate-inspired cookie recipe that's part of your holiday traditions? Maybe a unique twist or a family classic that you bake every year? I'd love for you to share your ideas in the comments below. Let's swap tips and keep the holiday baking magic alive. Here on my channel, I love blending food photography with the joy of baking, inviting you into my kitchen to celebrate the creativity and warmth of the holiday season. From creating perfectly spiced cookies like these to inspiring new ideas for your festive table. I hope you feel excited to bake something truly special. Thanks for joining me on this holiday adventure. Let's roll out that dough and create some delicious chocolatey masterpieces together. I take the disc out of the fridge and let it chill, but not too much, on the counter for about 10 minutes. Trust me, this step is everything. If it's too cold, rolling it out feels like arm wrestling a brick. Not exactly festive. Too warm, and it turns into a sticky situation nobody wants. Before I get rolling, both literally and figuratively, I like to make sure I've got everything I need within arm's reach. Trust me, there's nothing worse than getting halfway through and realizing you're missing something. Here's my go-to lineup. My trusty adjustable rolling pin for perfectly even cookies every time. Parchment paper or a silicone mat, because who wants dough sticking everywhere? Not me. A solid baking sheet. Gotta have a sturdy base for all our masterpieces. Vinyl gloves, totally optional, but they're a lifesaver if you want to keep your hands clean and dough-free. Cookie cutters. This is where the fun really starts. I always have my favorite festive shapes ready to go. A cake spatula, essential for lifting those delicate cookies without losing their shape. A dredge for sprinkling flour. optional, but one of my must-haves for baking. It's a game changer for lightly dusting the surface without overdoing it. Now that we're all set, it's time to roll up our sleeves and dive in. And hey, if some of these tools are new to you, no worries. I've linked them all in the description below to make it easy. I start by sprinkling a light layer of flour over the counter. It's my go-to trick to keep the dough from sticking. Personally, I like to throw on a pair of disposable vinyl gloves for this step. They're such a game changer when handling sticky dough, and cleanup is a breeze. But hey, if you're the kind of baker who loves getting your hands a little floury, go for it. Embrace the mess. Once that's done, I plop my unwrapped dough disc onto the floured surface, and just like that, we're ready to roll. I grab my trusty adjustable rolling pin and roll the dough to a perfect 1/4 inch thickness. The adjustable pin ensures even cookies, so no crispy edges or doughy centers to worry about. If your dough starts sticking to the pin, don't panic. Sprinkle a tiny bit of flour on top or lightly dust the rolling pin. Here's another way to roll out your dough mess-free. Sandwich it between 2 sheets of parchment paper. No flour dusted all over the counter, no sticky mess, and cleanup is as simple as tossing the parchment. Plus, it keeps the dough smooth and easy to handle. Perfect for stress-free holiday baking. Time to grab my cookie cutters and start stamping out some festive shapes. I'm keeping it simple and classic. A little tip from me: stick to cutting similar sized shapes for each baking sheet. This way, all the cookies bake evenly, and you won't end up with some overbaked or underdone. Trust me, it makes a big difference. Once all the dough is cut into cookies, I carefully pull away the extra dough from around the shapes. Don't even think about tossing it. This dough is reusable gold. I always save it for the next round of rolling and cutting. Here's a handy tip from me. Gather the scraps, form them into a ball, and loosely cover it with food wrap. This keeps the dough from drying out while you're busy transferring cookies to the baking sheet. I grab my baking sheet and line it with parchment paper. Pre-cut sheets are my go-to. They save so much time, but a roll works perfectly fine too. I carefully use a cake spatula to lift each cookie off the counter and onto the parchment-lined baking sheet. This little tool, game changer. It keeps the shapes intact and saves me from accidentally squishing or stretching them. Trust me, nothing's worse than a Christmas tree that looks like it melted. If you don't have a cake spatula, no worries. A thin, flat pancake spatula or even a large butter knife can do the trick in a pinch. Just be gentle. I always make sure to space the cookies about 1 inch apart on the sheet. This gives them enough room to bake evenly and allows proper airflow. It's a small detail, but it makes a big difference. When I'm done cutting out the cookies, I gather up the dough scraps and press them back into a disc. Then I roll it out again to cut even more cookies. If the dough starts to get too soft after a couple of rounds, here's a quick fix. Pop it back into the fridge for about 10 minutes to firm it up. It'll make rolling and cutting so much easier. I keep going until every last scrap is transformed into festive little cookies. Waste not, want not, especially with something this delicious. A single batch makes about 24 spiced gingerbread cookies, depending on the size of your cookie cutters. If you go for smaller shapes, like tiny stars or mini gingerbread men, you'll get even more cookies to enjoy. It's such a fun way to stretch the dough and have a little extra for sharing, or let's be honest, for sneaking a few yourself. Here's a little tip from me to you. When you're baking, keep cookies of the same size on one sheet. Mixing big and small cookies together? Disaster. The little ones will overbake while the big ones are still gooey. Grouping by size, make sure everything comes out perfectly golden and just right. Oh, and if you're as gingerbread obsessed as I am, you have to check out my gingerbread playlist. I've got a ton of recipes, from the classic gingerbread men we all love to fun twists you might not have tried yet. It's like a gingerbread wonderland, and I know you'll find something that makes you want to dive right back into baking. Let's keep this gingerbread adventure going. Here's my top secret trick. Don't tell anyone. Before baking, I always sneak the baking sheet into the fridge for about 10 minutes. Why, you ask? Well, here's the science. Chilling the dough firms up the butter in the cookies, which slows down how quickly it melts in the oven. This gives the cookie structure a chance to set before spreading, keeping those shapes crisp and perfect. And here's the key. Straight from the fridge, they go right into the fully preheated oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. That's right. Make sure your oven has reached its ideal temperature before those cookies go in. No delays, no detours, just perfectly shaped cookies every single time. Now you not only know the secret, but also the science behind it. Talk about being a baking pro. All right, it's oven time. I grab my chilled baking sheet and place it right on the middle rack of my fully preheated oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the sweet spot for even baking. I bake the cookies for about 8 to 10 minutes, keeping a close watch. The edges should look just set, while the centers will still be soft. Don't worry, they'll firm up as they cool. Here's a little insider tip from me. If you've ever battled with burnt cookies, haven't we all? Start with the minimum baking time, 8 minutes here, and check on them. Your altitude above sea level plays a big role in baking, so adjust as needed. If the cookies need extra time, give them another minute. For me, baking at high altitude, 9 minutes hits the sweet spot every time. Soft centers, perfectly set edges, and no burnt bottoms in sight. Baking isn't just about creating delicious treats. It's also about keeping your space clean and ready for the next batch of fun. While the cookies are baking, and maybe another batch is chilling, it's the perfect time to tidy up the counter. Here's my quick method. I grab my trusty dough cutter and scrape up all the flour and bits of dough from the surface. It's amazing how much easier this makes cleanup. Once I've gathered the mess into a neat little pile to toss, I wipe the counter clean with a damp cloth. It's oddly satisfying, and it leaves me with a fresh workspace ready for the next round of holiday baking chaos. If you are baking cookies to gift this holiday season, don't forget that how you package them can make all the difference. In my video on how to package homemade cookies for gifting, I'll show you simple and creative ways to make your treats look as amazing as they taste. From festive wrapping ideas to adding personal touches like ribbons and tags, you'll find everything you need to make your homemade gifts extra special. Be sure to check it out and get inspired for your holiday baking. When the cookies come out of the oven, I let them rest on the baking sheet for about 5 minutes. This little pause gives them time to set and firm up before I move them. Then I carefully transfer them to a cooling rack to cool completely. Trust me, this step is non-negotiable if you're planning to decorate them Warm cookies and icing, total meltdown. But if you don't have a cooling rack, no worries. You can lay the cookies out on a clean sheet of parchment paper or a kitchen towel. Just make sure they have enough space to cool evenly and don't stack them, or you'll end up with steam-softened cookies. I usually rely on my trusty cake spatula to transfer freshly baked cookies to the cooling rack because they're still soft and way too hot to handle. And there you have it. Chocolate ginger sugar cookies. A rich and flavorful twist that combines the warmth of spices with the indulgence of cocoa. These cookies are soft, perfectly spiced, and just the right amount of sweet to make them a holiday favorite. Whether you're serving them at a party, wrapping them up as gifts, or keeping them all to yourself, no judgment. They're guaranteed to bring a little extra joy this season. But the fun doesn't have to end here. Now that your cookies are baked, it's time to decorate them. Head over to my next video, where I'll show you step by step how to transform these cookies into stunning holiday creations with icing and sprinkles. Trust me, it's easier than it looks and so much fun. Thank you so much for baking with me today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more festive recipes and holiday inspiration. I'll see you in the next video. Happy baking and enjoy decorating your masterpieces.